we're gonna kick off. So, firstly, thank you to all of the attendees that are joining us today. It's a real pleasure to have you all here with us. As you're aware, this is the first of what we hope to be an amazing sort of new focus for Kwalee, building out sort of events and providing our partners, our friends, our studios, real in-depth insights into how you can positively, work in a harsh environment like what we are currently facing within the economy or the global gaming market right now. And today I've got the personal privilege to introduce Gabriel, who's one of our long-time and hopefully strong advocates of working from a published perspective. So, Gabriel, I would love for you to introduce yourself, and then I'll pass over to Tom, and then we can kick off with some questions and hopefully have some fun.
Sure thing. So I'm Gabriel Stürmer. I am the CEO founder of Clap Clap Games, and Clap Clap has been working since the very peak of hyper casual, doing hyper casual games, and now transitioning to whatever is next, right? So we've been successful at this. We've launched a number of hit games. We did literally hundreds of prototypes, many of them with Kwalee, and all of the hits also with Kwalee. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. So happy to get into the details.
Yeah, and like I said, I really appreciate you being here, Gabriel. Tom, would you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, for sure. My name's Tom Cunliffe. I am a game lead here at Kwalee in the mobile publishing team. That's a product-focused role, so strategic decisions and feature direction for all of the games that come through our portfolio, or a section of the games that come through our portfolio. I've been there for about 3.5 years-ish, so about middle age for Kwalee maybe. And I'm initially started off in hyper casual games quite heavily. I have probably produced about 500 or more prototypes in my time here, from conception to launch or conception to wherever it is that they get to. Been very privileged to have done many prototypes with Gabriel as part of that selection, as we've collaborated together to find some hits. This year and slightly prior in the previous year, we've sort of expanded our focus as a company so much more, and I've been able to have the privilege of working on bigger games from hyper casual as we look to diversify revenue streams, which hopefully we should have a lot of interesting insights from our time together in the stream today to share.
Great. And for everyone who doesn't know me, I'm John Wright. I'm Vice President of Mobile Publishing. Previously worked at Unity, Luna Labs, and a couple of other studios. And I'm going to be the moderator and the host today, which will be fun because normally I'm the one who does most of the talking. Today I'm going to get Gabriel and Tom to do most of the talking and hopefully add just some spice where I need. But to start off, Gabriel, I would love to know what your motivation was to create your own studio. Obviously, we know that gaming is a passion, and people want to develop this, but it's not an easy thing to do, launch your own company. As someone who's been part of a startup and led a startup, it's tough. So yeah, what was your motivation and your thinking as to why you launched Clap Clap in the first place?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And to be honest, for me, it wasn't such a motivation more than a necessity, right? Because just a background before Clap Clap, I was a project manager at Dell Computers, and I managed like huge projects with lots of people. And then I left to join a studio by a friend of mine, was called Cupcake Entertainment. And Cupcake, I joined as a CMO, I was a shareholder, and I spent there, I think 3 or 4 years, and we grew like thousands of times during my tenure as a CMO. And all of a sudden, I was fired from my executive position in that company, which was like a crazy story in itself. And then I found myself with basically, nothing else to do, nowhere to go. And I was like, I'll look into doing games still. And then I reached out to a few people. This one guy said, hey, I can invest if you put together a team. So I reached out to a developer. We started making some games together. Not to say this guy never put any money on it. He's like sent once, and then he started like, oh, I had a problem with the bank. I had a problem with contracts. There was always a problem happening. Took me a bit too long to realize the developer I had with me, he left. So it was basically me in Clap Clap. On my previous company, I was a marketing guy, right? CMO. And I didn't have any knowledge on making games. I wasn't a developer, but I also didn't have money and I didn't have anything else to do. So I basically started looking into Unity tutorials online. I did that for like 2 or 3 weeks. And at the end of it, I had 2 games that I made on my own. One of them was Submarine Jump that I sent to Kwalee, and that game ended up being published and sort of like made the whole foundation of Clap Clap going forward, right? So it was really like a big roller coaster sort of history at the very beginning, where it started like, it felt like everything was going wrong, and then all of a sudden it spiked with Submarine Jump. So
Yeah,
that's sort of how I came into this.
Yeah, look, I think it's an amazing story, Gabriel, because too often than not, people potentially don't give the respect to the solo dev that they deserve. And obviously, what you have shown in your career is that you've been able to go from being a marketing and a business guy to learning Unity, developing games, and then launching games successfully and generating millions of dollars in gross revenue for some of your titles, which again, we are very fortunate and very happy that you decided to partner with Kwalee, and we were the publishing partner for you for the last number of years. So I think one that particular history, I think, is very important, and it's very sort of motivating for a lot of the people. So I was wondering, for you, because your journey wasn't the traditional one in terms of you didn't do computer science and then like go and then code and then in a big studio and then do your own thing, because you had this different journey. What did you learn from your prior experience working at companies like Dell, who are one of the biggest computer companies in the world? And what did you learn from that? And how did you take that into founding your own studio? And basically, why get into hyper casual in the first place, right? So yeah, I would love to know a bit around that.
Sure. And Dell, I used to work as in the e-commerce part of the company. So if you look at mobile games, especially in-app purchase monetized ones, it's pretty much an e-commerce, right? I think there's a lot that can be taken from one side to the other. How you optimize your products, what sort of products you offer, how you optimize the entire user experience throughout the game. And I think that was really worth it. We used to run A/B tests, the e-commerce platform, which we do almost daily on our mobile games as well. So I think all of that learning was really important, and also coming into games with a different perspective. As you said, I didn't start doing like maybe some Steam games or indie stuff before I've gone into mobile games. I was like more of a business guy, and then I sort of landed into games afterwards. So I think that different perspective it's really what helped me. And then going from Cupcake into Clap Clap, and Cupcake, I was a CMO. I used to run UA, analytics, monetization, community, and I think especially like the UA side was really helpful on for hyper casual games, because hyper casual was pretty much optimizing a game for UA, right? Making the game that does the best creatives and can generate a low CPI. And with the low CPI, you can bring a lot of people. So I think that knowledge definitely helped when we started Clap Clap. And I think at the very beginning of the company, getting low CPI was definitely our biggest strength, right? And then I think we maybe at the very beginning we sort of struggle a little bit more with making the games good, which is something that I think sort of reversed as we kept going with the company. So I think that's those are the learnings that I've taken from my previous experiences.
Yeah, and I really relate to that in terms of, you know, what you said there, Gabriel, about, you know, building a game for marketability rather than building a game for the game's perspective, right? And I think in the hyper casual phase, for good or for bad, people were very good at this particular thing, and you know, building a game that was highly marketable and very sticky, and all of these sort of buzzwords I hate. But I think one of the interesting things about Clap Clap, Gabriel, is, you know, you are a successful studio. You have launched multiple successful games to the top of the charts. Very luckily, you have done that within partnership within Kwalee. But something that is very interesting to me is that you've remained true to keeping a small team. And I feel like this is, in the current ecosystem, you guys have done an incredibly smart decision, because, you know, if you would have grown dramatically over the last couple of years based on like reinvesting all of the profits into growing the team, you would be in a much different position now. Like a lot of studios are in a very bad place because they increased their operating expense too much, and the changes in the environment have now yielded a very very negative effect. So yeah, look, you're a small company. But yeah, why did you remain true to keeping a small agile company rather than growing, even though you had the ability to do so?
Yeah, I think having worked in such a massive company as Dell, I think you sort of see how, you know, being such a big, massive behemoth slows you down in some ways, right? And I think the fact that Alan, which is the developer who works with me, and I have such a close relationship. We do really well together. We know each other really well. We know whenever like we discuss something in the game, both of us already know what we need to do, right? We sort of write down something in Trello just so we can keep track of each other, of each other's work. But there isn't a need for like a big Jira card and describing stuff really deeply. So we discuss it quickly, and then everyone knows what they need to do, and then we get going. And I think at that way we get to be much more productive than some bigger studios that I know, right? So there were years we did close to like 100 prototypes, being only 2 people. That's a couple or more a week, right? So I think that sort of production and speed, it's really hard to match. You need to grow the studio a lot more, and as you said, it's a lot more healthy for us as a company, different from many other studios that I know. I think we've been able to transition to this post hyper casual sort of market really well, while many other studios haven't been able to do so as successfully as we have. So I think that's, you know, we could go for days on this subject, the pros and cons, because it's not perfect as well. I think there are limitations to what we do, but so far we've been able to keep up with, you know, everything we've been able to do. And at the same time, I think Kwalee has been super helpful in supplementing some of the stuff that we, you know, lack on our side. Like, for example, having some artists looking into the game, because we don't have like a real artist in the company. It's just me pushing stuff into place. So having like a real artist looking into it and giving feedback, and then even making changes in the game. I think the way that we work with the SDK team on Kwalee, where basically they implement everything. We basically just have to call stuff from the game. Whenever there are updates, they do it. I think there are other publishers where it's super difficult work and takes a lot of time from developers just, you know, updating those things. So I think that's also something that's really helpful. So I think I always said that, you know, choosing a publisher is sort of like a cultural fit. You need to, the way that you work with needs to fit with the way that a publisher work. And I think for us, it always have worked. I think the way that we work and the way that you guys work, it fits really well together.
Right. And yeah, look, I appreciate all of the comments and the feedback. It's obviously it's amazing for me to hear that. Just so everyone's aware, that wasn't pre-rehearsed, guys. That is just something that Gabriel just said off the bat. But it goes into the area I want to talk about for for the next couple of questions. So, and also I think Tom's been very quiet, very unnaturally quiet, and so we want to get Tom involved. But we want to talk about the partnership. So, for anyone who's not aware, Kwalee and Clap Clap have been in business now for 5 years, which is in the publishing landscape is a hell of a long time, everyone. And for you to work with someone for such a long period of time, you need to make sure, as Gabriel said, there is a cultural fit, there is alignment, there is support, there is trust. These are very big aspects of, how to work with someone. So again, what I think, what I would love to know, and it may be just expanding a bit on what you said previously, Gabriel, was what makes a good partnership with Kwalee, and ultimately, Tom, I want you to jump in on this one and also give your perspective because it's a two-way street. It's not just Dad having a good publisher; you also need to have a good studio, and both have to work in a positive way symbiotically. So I'll let Gabriel start, but then I want Tom to jump in and talk about what makes a good dev.
Yeah, I think what makes it good is really, I always say it to every studio I talk to, every fan who's in games. Publisher is only as good as the people you interact to, right? And I think over the years we've been really, really, lucky to get amazing people from Dell. Like Tom, obviously, is a big friend of ours, and we really love working together. But the guys we had before also have always been super nice. So I think, the relationship, how good we interact, how open they are to, whatever we need. Because sometimes, there's a new process in place. We look into it, like we are a small company, we struggle, then we come back to Kwalee and say, hey, this is really not working for us. We need something different. And it always, Kwalee has always been really open to I understand, we'll make arrangements so that this works for all of us. And I think it's always for the benefit of both sides, right? Because if we are not being productive, if we are not doing well, we're not going to generate good games. And if we don't do the good games, I think this relationship won't work, right? For none of the sides. So I think that's basically what it is. There isn't like a ready recipe for being successful and having a good relationship, but I think it comes down to how we interact with both sides.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think you also kind of took the words right out of my mouth at the start there, that like a lot of these publishers in our little corner of the industry fundamentally do the same thing. At the end of the day, there are subtle differences between them and how they approach things. The goal is generally the same. It really is sort of the people behind them, and then equally the people behind the developers that separates them. And I think the fact that we've worked together for 5 years kind of highlights that. There's a good relationship and we're getting things done, and that's ultimately sort of at the crux of it. I think because I've been able to work with a lot of developers in my time here, and luckily Gabriel and Alan as well. And I think there has always been a separation between how you guys view the market you focus on versus a lot of the other developers which have come our way or we've seen working out on the landscape. You have a focus on the audience and you have a focus on not wasting your time, really. Like your time is valuable, and you focus that super well, whether it was in hyper casual, coming up with dozens of ideas a week and not ever being afraid of trimming the fat and dropping the ones which we weren't super confident with, to not dropping ideas when we didn't have full confidence in them, because we've had games come through together before where we looked at the data and we sort of just said, you know what, this isn't quite it. I think we can make this one work if we have another go at this, and believing in the right ideas. I think Gabriel has a really, really good understanding of the market. And I think if other people want to learn from Clap Clap's example and their success of launching games, it would be to pretty much drop all fear of developing, of fear of developing something that doesn't work. I think the embracement, or if that's even a word, the embracing of failure from Clap Clap has allowed them to get to the success way more quickly, and find even more creative ideas even more quickly as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, you have to take risks in life, in development. And yeah, I want us to expand a bit more about the game production side and the ways of working. So obviously, Gabriel, as you're aware, we've launched 3 sort of chart-topping games, during our partnership together. We've tested obviously a lot more than that, but 3 of them have been very successful. Submarine Jump is still 4 or 5 years after launch, is still getting up and down in the charts even now, which is an amazing achievement. I mean, it would be great to understand both of your perspectives. How did we get to that success, or is there any sort of tips or tricks for the audience that we have that you would advise them in terms of how to work with a publisher to find multiple successful titles?
Yeah, I can kind of start off on that and then discuss it. We can kind of discuss it together. I think like those 3 games they all have slightly different traits, and I think when you look closely at them, they all kind of fit the time period of which they were launched in quite closely. You look at Submarine Jump, it's a 2D game. It's not generally something we see the greatest amount of success with currently, but we were able to make that work in its time period and really tailor that experience for what was kind of more like a even more hyper casual than normal, right, in 2019 when it was pushed out. Build Your Vehicle's kind of an evolution on that, something with more depth but was still highly accessible. And never, like, the difference between those 2 games is they never really drop the common links between them. We've always tried to like drill into everybody we talk to the idea of making highly accessible games, and get games without very accessible themes and really easy to pick up and play. I think the games that Clap Clap have launched in partnership with us demonstrate that perfectly. All of those games have common traits, which is they're extremely accessible to get into, extremely easy to play. They're also built to be scalable and launched really rapidly as well. Like there's no sort of faffing about on any of those games. The turnaround time on a lot of them was very quick. So I don't know if you agree, Gabriel, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think, they have been produced and, prototyped and tested differently as well. Like the Submarine Jump was a very early thing. We didn't have like a relationship with Kwalee per se. We just sort of sent a game. I signed up on the website, and then Jack at the time was a PM, reached out and we started discussing. I sent the game, we ran a test, it did okay. Then we did some more changes, and then it sort of kept going like that. And that was the only game that I had at the time, right? And then when we go into like Build Your Vehicle a couple of years later, Build Your Vehicle came after like a lot of testing, a lot of prototyping, just literally, I think probably out of 100 plus prototypes that we made, one of them was Build Your Vehicle. And I think the way to get there was wildly different again, because we had to do a lot of testing, a lot of ideas that we really loved, discarded and left behind. So I think of the best games that we ever thought of were left behind, because that was just the nature of how hyper casual works. It's ruthless. It's data, purely data. If the data says it's supposed to keep going, then keep going. If not, leave behind. You take no, just lots of casualties. And then going into Landlord, I think it's pretty different again, because at that time, I think we started slowing down in prototype production, focusing more into trying and build stuff that could engage the player a long time, right? It's just, again, market maturing into a slightly different thing. And I think that's where Landlord came from. It was a game that maybe if it was a few years earlier, it maybe wouldn't be launched, or maybe it would, I think. But just at that moment, it was just a game that could go a lot forward. It could turn into like a full-fledged casual thing, just because of how the team and the entire structure of it work. So I think it has been wildly different ways to get to those games, but it's just, as Tom said at the very beginning, they're basically a fruits of what was happening at that time in the market. So
and many of those prototypes as well, like we when you discussed Gabriel Build Your Vehicle sort of being the result of 100 prototypes or so, many of those were soft launches as well. Like they looked like they were the ones, but then we kind of like had the balls, right, to kill them when they weren't going to be the game, and we still chased. You know, if anybody ever gets a game into soft launch, that's always a very exciting feeling, because you honestly feel like this is going to be the one. But then the concept, like the idea, and kind of like highlights your mentality on it as well, as that you said, no, there's got to be a better game than this, and like this isn't going to quite make what we really want to get out of this. And the result was Build Your Vehicle, which ended up pushing the envelope quite far. So
I think out of 100 prototypes that we do, usually 3 or 4 are going to go in soft launch, and 1 of them is going to global launch, right? So I think that's something we've seen many times before in terms of like games that went into soft launch. And not only with Kwalee, but with other publishers that we worked in the past. I think it's the reality. Like it's really hard to go into global launch. That's just the truth. And the fact that we've been able to do it together multiple times, I think it's it's a big plus.
Great. Then guys, moving on. Gabriel, from your perspective, when selecting a partner, it doesn't have to be a publisher, but it could be, someone you work with, a technology provider, a publisher, whatever. Like, what sort of traits do you look for? What are the things that are important to you as a founder?
Yeah, I think just being honest is really important. Like, and I think I am very honest myself, maybe to a point where it could be uncomfortable many times. I know I'm definitely not easy to work with, but although I think I'm a nice guy, I think sometimes they really bring out the truth. Like, this is not working. I take no I take no hostages in this situation. So I think honesty, definitely, but also at the same time being a nice environment, making it a nice environment. And I think we've been able to do it successfully with Kwalee over those years, right? We've always, we always start our daily calls with like some laughs and telling some wild stories. And whenever we meet each other, it's always really nice. So I think that's, for me, for whatever a partner is, being it, a publisher, someone who works with me, whatever service provider, I think having honesty and a nice relationship, it's what matters the most.
Tom, anything you want to add from our perspective?
I think you're muted, Tom.
Yeah, you're on mute, Tom.
Whoops, the classic. So I definitely echo what Gabriel says. I think there has to be a little bit of initial discovery when you're working with publishers a little bit. I definitely wouldn't advocate just sprinting down the direction of one partner and only one partner initially if you're getting into this for the first time as a developer. Like, you really need to sort of ask around quite a lot and talk to the right people to make sure you find a good fit for you personally. Everybody works slightly differently, right? Like, we've worked with so many teams and they all have subtle differences between them. And I think ultimately the right partner will be out there, but I wouldn't recommend following just your gut feeling and trying to be quick in this regard. It's okay to take your time. I think also, like, this doesn't need to be rapid in terms of relationships and actually launching a game. Even if you don't have something right now, starting the conversations and making your intent clear to the right people is pretty valuable stuff. A lot of the time when we're talking to devs and assessing viability of a game coming into our pipeline, we really try and look at the founder's mentality and their track record and just who they are as people, what their intent is. It's very intent orientated, and like working with Gabriel, for example, always demonstrates to us that Gabriel's got the tenacity to carry games forwards from concept all the way to completion. That's a big plus for us, and we know that because the relationship's so long. If you don't have a relationship with a publisher right now, I'd say now is the time to start and actually start developing it, even if you don't have anything yet. Talking to the right people and saying, this is what my goal is. How can you help me achieve this goal? Because I can do all of these things, and I feel like if you do these things, then we'll have something that can launch. So yeah, it's something that you should always start putting time to. And I think for many devs, it's not something that comes second nature. We want to make games at the end of the day. And then sometimes the logic is we have a game, the publisher will like the game, therefore we'll go forwards. There is a huge sort of relationship, social aspect to this, right? This is a partnership at the end of the day when it comes to publishing. It's between two parties. If that relationship's good, it can really work wonders for getting games launched. And I definitely recommend putting a lot of focus on it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, guys. I think the business of publishing is the business of partnerships, and the way that you should respect your developers as if they are a valued partner, because that's what they are. They're not someone who work for, the developer doesn't work for the publisher. This is a collaborative effort. It's a creative thing. And, one of the best bits of advice I can give is just ensure that you have a one-to-one direct, social good relationship with the publisher, and build out that rapport early on, because it will help internally if you can build an advocate internally with the publisher, then they will fight for you, they'll push forward, they'll do what they can. So building out that relationship is key. Guys, we've got time for one more question, then I want to keep some for Q&A, but let's talk about maybe not the elephant in the room, but the new kid on the block, hybrid. So obviously we all know that hyper casual is moving into hybrid. Gabriel, we've been working on this with you for a number of months now. And I think you're one of the people that are adapting quickly into this area. And I would love to just get some insight from you in terms of what you're focusing on, how what changes are coming, how you're working differently with us, or any advice for the people here today.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, the transition for us hasn't been that difficult, because both Alan and I have worked with casual in the past, like full-fledged casual games, 100% in-app purchase, monetized. So I think a lot of the learnings and the stuff that we did before have been carried over into this, even though we got really good with like making super fast prototypes and, being really good that way. I think the needs for slightly different and sometimes higher level approaches in some things from our side that I think we've been able to adapt well. I think one thing that we have definitely changed is, I think in some ways we have taken more ownership of the success of the games. I think if you're working with a publisher and merely leaving it to the publisher to make sure the game is successful, but it's unlikely to do so, right? It might, but I think at this market, there needs to be a partnership that goes beyond like the developer develops the game, the publisher publishes the game. I think there's a big gap that has been filled by both sides now, and definitely we are doing it. So we're looking a lot into analytics, and Tom and I discuss those things like almost daily for like Landlord Simulator, which is our latest game, a game that is, it started as a very hyper thing and is now becoming a much bigger game, hybrid and plus. And so I think, looking into analytics and owning it and making sure you spot the things that sometimes the publisher might miss, because it's not because the publisher can't do it, it's just because the developer has a different perspective, understands the game from the inside. What could go wrong? You look for it in the data and try to identify. So I think that's one of the differences. And to be honest, we haven't started a new game in a very long time in the hybrid era, because I think we've been working for so long on Landlord Simulator. So that's what I'm looking forward to next. Whenever we get to that point, whenever like Landlord is done and it's like a very huge success, and it's stable, into live ops, now we can look into what's next. And I think that's something, I'm curious to see how that's going to go, because definitely going to be a lot different from how it was before. If I am to predict, we're probably going to give the games a better chance of succeeding, and instead of like killing it super fast, because the very first test that we run just didn't get those perfect KPIs. So I see that as being the difference.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think like just to sort of sum up this kind of transition very quickly as well. Like I think what the main thing we've learned is initially we kind of viewed this emerging term, right, hybrid, casual, whatever it meant at the time when it started being talked about a lot, as sort of like an evolution of hyper casual. I think it's more and more clear that this is sort of a variant of casual, and the games now need their time in the sun. We can't approach everything like a hyper casual prototype. That's a good thing, though. It means that we get to fully invest our time into the right ideas, but it also means that we're taking more risks on concepts where we can't just say we'll test anything. We have to say this seems like the most viable test, and there's a lot more creative thought process going into the testing process in the first place as well. I think that if I had to summarize it in 3 words for these games, it would just be accessible casual games, right? Like these are games which have very easy onboarding, which is pulling the benefits of a hyper casual game. And I think as a result, it means that if you're a developer that ever dabbled in hyper casual or making very, very simple concepts, I'd highly recommend going back and looking in your back catalog and saying, is there a way for us to attach a deeper product model to this? Like if we were to delve deeper into this, could we realistically see this sticking with users for 30 days plus? And ask those questions of yourself. I think it's worth it. I don't think it's I think it's worth going back and looking at your games, not just moving on away from that era like it was a black sheep era or anything like that. So we'll recommend spending that time.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, guys. I think the major shift from me from hyper to hybrid is just the investment onto the product side of the games, ensuring that you're developing much more intricate, complex, still fun, sticky experiences, but more meta, more engagement points, giving community, adding live ops, events, allowing yourself to develop something that will be in market for 90 days, 180 days, etc. Not just focusing on this core mechanic, which will, after 7 days gets quite repetitive and boring. It's building out a much deeper experience for the user. But let's go to some questions. We're running out of time. So I'm going to pick 3 of these. There's about 7 or 8. So apologies for those who ask questions that we won't be able to get to answer. But Gabriel, so considering the mobile gaming industry's trend towards hybrid casual and producing more sophisticated and content-rich games, do you believe there's a need to expand your team to accommodate this shift? I think this is a great question for a small business, small studio owner.
Yeah, definitely. And, we've been 2 people since almost the very beginning. And it's always something, that comes back and forth. Is now the time to expand? Do we see now the need? Like, for example, I think having an artist would be one thing that maybe is select that we have. And maybe, it will make sense for us to go that way eventually, have better quality, visual quality in our games. So I think, yes, definitely. Not to say I'm hiring artists as of now, because I think at the same time, Alan and I work really well together, and to have like a third person inserted into this relationship, it needs to be someone who fits within that culture that we already have, and every new person that comes into an organization makes it, that it requires more things to be done, more paperwork, it requires more communication, it requires more organization. So I think, yes, it seems to be getting there, but at the same time, it needs to be done right. It's not to mess up with the the way that we work currently. And we know it's not going to be perfect whenever that happens, but just try and make it so that whenever that happens, is the best that it could be.
Yeah, and I also think one of the pluses of working with a publisher rather than solo dev is the ability to call on those resources. Like you said earlier, Gabriel, it's, we have product people like Tom, we have business, biz dev people, we have production people, we have analysts, we have creative people, we have marketing people, like all of those additional resources that you get exposure to as part of building something to launching something. And if you ever needed another developer, right, to co-dev with, that's something you could give me a call, and we would have that discussion and we would support you because we back you and we trust you, and we know that if it push come to shove, we would support you in any way. So next question. So what's been voted for here? So I guess this is more for Tom, but again, Gabriel, I would really appreciate your input as well. So how does Kwalee enrich partner studios in a journey to launch hit games? So I think, Tom, maybe that could be more of a direction of what do we do our side? Like Gabriel builds the games, but yeah, what do we do to add value rather than just marketing and funding?
Yeah, enrich is a very poetic way of phrasing that question, isn't it? I think the way we enrich the projects that come our way from devs like Clap Clap is really just we identify all the places in which Gabriel and Alan can't cover, right? And we fill those gaps, because if those gaps aren't filled, the odds are significantly weighted against the developer, right? At the end of the day, as a developer, you just want to make games. I think the more that you can do, and Clap Clap have always been able to take on, they have such a good understanding of UA and creatives and marketing that they're able to sort of shoulder more than the average developer can. But these are, for the most people, like things you want to shuffle off to somebody who has the expert teams that can make that happen for you on your behalf. Do you want to spend all your time generating creative videos? Probably not, compared to developers. We employ dozens of creative artists who will do that for you, and that's generally how we fill in that process. Do you want to develop a deep understanding of UA? Get the budget for behind your own UA campaigns and try and find the winning creative out of those creatives you generate. I mean, you can, but it's just more money you're investing that you otherwise don't need to, right? We're sort of here to cover those parts, right? Your goal is to get your game into people's faces, and that's kind of what we try and do, right? There's also like deeper answers to that as well. I think Gabriel touched on that a little bit, but once something has really come together, the main process is how can we make it better over time? We have always had a really hands-on relationship with our partners. Not every publisher is like that. It's worth saying. There are many partners where you won't really talk to them that much because they'll just ask you for the milestone delivery, and then that's when you'll have those conversations. Me and Gabriel talk almost every day. We used to talk more when we were doing like a lot of prototypes, but we still talk very, very frequently on Landlord and discuss the direction of the game and what sort of feature set is the best way. And we try and take such a collaborative approach to that my hope is that every developer we work with feels like they have a real say, that we haven't hijacked the project from them just to tell them what to do, and that they are ultimately the captains of the ship and we're there to help steer it. That's how I think we enrich the projects. We've got to fill those gaps and get games out quickly.
We've got time for one more before I have to shut this down on time. But shout out to Honey from Fahi Studios, one of our partners. He just asked this, so I'm going to jump to him. Live ops. Obviously, live ops is quite complicated. Gabriel, you're a two-man studio. Where does that sit with you? Where does that sit with us? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to live ops, one way of doing it that I've been thinking of is just making sure that you have a framework that you can just plug in, stuff on top of it. I noticed that many games, they have like a cyclical live ops that, 1 week you have this type of event, the next week you have the other type. And that's basically schedule. You develop this event that fits into the game, you develop the next event, and then you just cycle it from there. A couple of months later, you come back, you do like a new event, like a special one, and then you have that one running every 3 or 4 months, right? So I think it might feel daunting and impossible to do as a small studio, But if you are, I think it might just be our mindset that we always think of things, how can we do this in the quickest way and the best way as a 2-people team? And there's always ways to do anything as we are, right? So I think that's just the way that we go about it.
Great. I love the
work for
optimism. I love, and guys, thank you for everyone who attended today. It was a real pleasure to talk to you again, Gabriel. Tom, thanks for the time. And hopefully everyone learned something from this talk. You can contact Gabriel or myself or Tom through LinkedIn if you have any other questions, or through the usual channels. And yeah, everyone have a great day, and good luck with the next session. So thank you, everyone.